I'm ready to answer questions that I'm able to answer, so please go ahead.
I came to learn. I don't have questions.
And please speak loudly, I don't hear well.
I came to learn.
You came to learn, so you should ask. How are you going to learn?
If someone else is going to.
Okay.
Here's a question. I deal with a lot of Russian Jews with Russian from former Soviet Union.
I'm sorry, forgive me.
I'll move up.
Please, yeah, please.
Jews from the former Soviet Union, Russians, that men don't have a bris milah. What are the parameters with regards to A?
No, I just want to ask the one thing,
Sure, go
and I'm
ahead.
getting out. After this,
I'm being recorded. What? That what? What is it?
11:30, I'd like to pack up and go. At 11:30, pack up and go.
I don't know. I think they still
Yeah,
wanted
no,
to
it's
speak
not.
with me. Did you ask them?
There's nothing on the program. Okay, I'll
Because
see you
I
at 11:30.
think they said so. All right, fine. I'll be upstairs. Please, you speak. There are Russian Jews that you deal with,
Men.
and many of the men are not gemalt.
Kamala. So here's the question. Number one is A, to what extent do you have to approach them and talk to them about bris milah? That's number one.
Let's take one at a time. Else the halach of teichacha. There are two halachas here. Halach of teichacha, and then there's a halacha that it's not only the individual chiyuv of bris milah, or the father's chiyuv when he's a katan, but it's Klal Yisrael's chiyuv. There's a special din that if father is not malhim, bezn is mechiyuv. Bezn meaning there's a din in Klal Yisrael. So really, of course, you're mechuyv to talk to them, but you got to talk to them at the right time, because the whole concept is they should do the right thing, not that you should become a pest and they don't, and you're bringing to close off the spigots of good hashpah. So you got to time it properly. If you don't time it properly, you're going to ruin it. Do you know what I mean?
Where do you cross over the line from?
Only you know the answer when you deal with them.
When it becomes from a Tino Shinish to a Mumar, I don't want to say achis, but if you say this, you say that's a strong word. But if you keep on saying to him, you have to have a bris, you have to have a bris, so doesn't that eventually doesn't the idea of him being a Tino Shinishba fall off? If he knows he has to have a bris and he doesn't,
I'm terribly sorry, it's not true.
okay, well, that's right.
Because the Rambam says that the Karoyim have a din, not the original Karoyim, but the latter generations of Karoyim are not considered Rishoyim, they're Tenoiksim Shenishbu. So therefore the Rambam Paskins, if you see that he's shechting properly, even though a mumar hareyu ka'akum is like a goy shechted, and even though he shechted properly, it's nevela. So the din is mumar hareyu ka'akum is also nevela, whether it's a deraisa or the rabbanan. The Rambam says if the children of the karoyim shechted, it's not nevela, it's kosher if you watched and he did the right thing. Why? They're tenoiksim shenishbu. They're brought up that this is the true religion. So after they're brought up a true religion, you are arguing with them. That makes them a mumma because you told them. How many times do you have to tell them that you're wrong? You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. He becomes a mumma now because I told him he's wrong. Who are you? I was brought up by my parents that what I believe in, that only Torah Shebeksav is the true Torah, and you're telling me not like that. Therefore, I become a mumma because you said so. Why should I accept what you said? So the Tinnik Shenishma remains. Sure. You're telling him, and so there may be a point when he's beginning to accept, hey, you're right. You're right. So then he's ready to hear, if you're right, he's ready to hear what are the mitzvahs that I have to perform now.
Now, based upon that, so let's think it takes a while for him to have a bris, but he wants to be called up to the Torah. He wants to be called up to the Torah, but he doesn't have a Yiddish Jewish name?
He's a Tinnik Shanishba.
No, can he have a Jewish name without having a bris milah?
Alexei is his name. What do you mean
No,
a
he wants
Jew?
to name Moshe.
What is a Jew? No. A name is a name. Is a name is a name. There's no such thing. Hey, from now on you're Yosef. That doesn't make you Yosef. There's a din you have to be called Yosef for 30 days. A name is not just because I told you a new name. So his name is Alexei Ben Alexandrovich, whatever. That's his name.
So you call him up, you don't give him a Jewish name before bris. That's what I'm really asking.
No, that's not a halacha. Minig Yisrael is to give a name by a bris. There are people for instance, if you know you can't do a bris for a long time, so you can give them the name. That's a minig Yisrael, via Korish might be Yisrael by the bris. It's not an aveira if you gave him a name before or after. It's not an aveira. It's minig Yisrael. But someone who's not going to get a bris at the eighth day, or very young, some people wait, some don't. But it's not a halacha. This is what I have to do. In Hilchas name, like a ksuba. If this is the name, this is the name. You know what I mean? If it's a goyish name, it's a goyish name, but that's what it is.
Call him up by a goyish name. So the Rabbi is saying, call him up by a
Fine,
goyish
fine.
name, rather than giving him a Hebrew name without a bris.
No, I never said that. I said give him a Hebrew Hebrew
Give him a
name.
Hebrew name
Without a bris. What's it
Okay,
got to
that's a good
do?
question.
He's old enough to have a Hebrew name, but tell him in order for you to have this name, tell your friends to call you this. Not everybody. You should be for 30 days. Then it's his name.
That's his name. And then the last thing is, are there any restrictions can you give a man who doesn't have a bris? Can you give him an aliyah?
Technically, yes. He's not a mumma. What if Meisuechav Machmas Mila, and he's still a person that it's a sakana to be mal because he's a hemophiliac? Let's say he can't get a bris, he can't get an aliyah. I mean, why not?
But let's take it separate. Mistama, he's not Shomer Shabbos. Is the Rabbi right with
But
that?
that's another halacha that for Kiruv, that even a kohanim, it's another din. But that's something else.
Unfortunately,
Please,
nowadays,
yeah.
we encounter people involved in toeva relationships. And we can get into a circumstance where you invite someone to your house and they want to bring their partner, for example, and similar.
What about a non-from couple that they don't keep Tahas HaMishpacha? What's the difference between that and this?
Well, I guess the question I'm
It's
asking,
the same thing.
even if
same.
they would stay over and stay in the same room or something?
Well, that may be a problem, but it's the very same problem in the example that I gave. You have the same question. You're giving him a hechatimtza of intimacy, which is shaloi al pi din. Is that lifnei iver? I doubt it. I mean, because it's giving them a room doesn't mean that you machshel them. But it's the same question. And I would leave out, even though it is toeva, but this is not the sole case where the Torah calls it toeva. So, it's an aveira, but the label toeva doesn't necessarily, in halacha, change the complexion of the question. You wonder?
Can I ask a follow-on? Does the Rav feel that there's not, let's say you have a couple, but you have children there. So if they're a man and a woman that, okay, they're living together, but your children don't know necessarily then I don't. But is it?
But if the children don't know, there's nothing detrimental. Because if they don't have the Muslim, there are two men. How many times men shared apartments? It's only after the closet was open that people became aware. And it's not always that way. There are many men, Chalila, from men, have nothing to do with Mishkav Zacha, but it's cheaper to share apartments. Just because women, remember always that girls that go to school together, so they used to share apartments. Does that mean they're lesbians? I mean, this is the way it used to be, but now there's like a chshad because everything's out in the open. Yes, please.
What's the hashkafa, the mindset, when, my example is I work with somebody, she's a Jew, very unaffiliated, she knows very, very little. Even took me a while to realize that she's Jewish. She's a married 50-year-old lady.
She's a,
Married, and she's in her 50s, she has children. What's the hashkafa when dealing with her? Her husband is not Jewish. Meaning, I want to be a makaber, I want to invite her for a Shabbos meal, but her husband's not Jewish. It feels to me like I'm pulling apart a couple a little bit, and they've had, I don't know what their relationship is like, but it feels like she comes closer to Judaism, let's say down the line. What happens in her relationship? What's the hashkafa, what's the mindset?
the truth is that your job is to do the best you can to be mashpia latov. Usually the best hashpah, in fact, I believe that this whole revolution of Bali Tshuva came about when our community went into the business, I don't say business world, went out and became part and parcel of people working for a living with other people. That's when it happened. You have to understand the psychology of those people who know very little. Their lives are very empty, and they know it. Very wealthy people, known as the jet set. Why did it become jet set? Because what's life? What is it all about? And it bothers a human being. What is this all about? More steak, more ice cream. After a while, even that becomes banal. So these people are looking very, very much looking to become a jet set, doing things which are dangerous, or going visiting, going all over the world. They have to find some sort of answer. It's an empty life. When from a people, so how do they rationalize in order to keep going on with life? Oh, those Orthodox Jews, they're from another planet. And the moment that they meet these people and they see Orthodox Jews are human beings, I would hope most of them are very decent human beings. Hey, they're not from another planet. They're real and they were nice. I remember in our community, we had a very Orthodox few block. In our block where we lived, there were 30 sukkahs. We weren't afraid that our children would go, to any other. All the Jewish homes were from. So I remember we had a tenant, an Indian doctor who I think he was Muslim, and he married a woman who came from a Buddhist family. You can imagine the apocalypse, because the Muslims believe in one God, and the Buddhists are Ivdei Avodah Zarah, according to them. So they weren't too religious. But he told me his grandfather was a very religious man. This person was so overwhelmed by Orthodox Jews. First of all, one of the people he worked with, he used to tell me, a Jew, he says, he's going to win the Nobel Prize. He was a very bright fellow who retired and is now sitting and learning in Eretz Israel. But he was overwhelmed. He's in the marketplace. He sees Jews. They're highly intelligent. They're nice people. He was overwhelmed. This is a guy. He was overwhelmed with Jews. And that's exactly where this whole Baal Tshuva revolution started. Jews went into the marketplace. Hey, people felt they have a purpose in life, these Jews. I remember many years ago, there was a doctor that many of the yeshiva and kol people went to. He was very special in how much he charged. He was he appreciated the frumma community, but he was not from. And some people, he felt a little guilty. He grew up. He used to say, when I see the rabbi, the Orthodox, walking with his son to shul, he used to go to shul Shabbos, this fella. He says, when I see the way he relates to his son, his heart goes out. I don't have that relationship with my son. So he saw something that it's a wonderful thing. And then when people spoke to him, so he says, look, Rabbi, I was in the Navy, you know what I mean? Like he just felt he's too much in the Memte Shari Tumah. But at the same time, people become overwhelmed just because you're you, not because of what you preach, because of what you are. They'll ask you questions. You know, I understand partners in Torah are very successful. Their rules are, don't preach, answer questions, just learn Torah. And somehow it works. These people start asking, and a lot of them become frum. They're learning, and then what do you do for this? What do you do? People become frum that way. No preaching, it's what you are. And you're going to eventually open up the well springs of a human being. What am I here for? Not chayvasi b'elomi. What is it all about? So eventually it works. You have to be the judge, not to jumpstart. In our community, we had 2 or 3 such situations. Women that were married to goyim with families. They didn't know. They moved into from a neighborhood. They got an apartment. Who became their friends from a women. So before you knew it, they kashed the husbands, of course, had to be tolerant. Whether the husband, they treifus out of the house, however it was worked out, they kashed their homes. Next step, they want to go to the mikveh. So I paskened, under no circumstance are you allowed to accept such a woman in the mikveh. And she knows, you know, that she's married to a guy. So that means it's okay to be married to a guy. Go to the mikveh. There's an Akedas Yitzchak that says, and I'm not sure, Adayim, I'm pretty sure he doesn't mean it happened, but he wants to explain something. He says that there was a house of ill repute, and there were Jewish girls there, so the Rabbanim got together, let's build a mikveh there. So Chalila, because by building a mikveh there, you're telling a big mezana is fine. So it's a message which is Shalai Kadin. So, pardon?
Did you get your answer? The brothers say encourage you to continue.
You have to use your judgment at which stage to talk. But they're going to ask you questions first. That's the way it's going to happen.
On that subject, my wife's been doing...
Louder, please.
My wife's been doing partners in Torah for about 15 years with one lady. And the lady has become frum. Her husband is Jewish, but not frum. They never got divorced. I don't know if that was the entire reason, but...
Whatever it is, you did your job. I mean, whatever you did.
That's life.
But you did your job. I mean, of course, these things happen.
Yeah. I have another...
There are many such situations that I know of, yes.
More of a comment. I work for a secular Jewish organization.
Question.
No. So I speak to conservative and reform rabbis, and I see they are waging a war against the Orthodox.
Of course.
And I don't
That's
see-
why it's your job to befriend them.
And I do, but I don't see that the Orthodox establishment is countering that war.
I am against this phrase, Orthodox establishment, simply because it never existed. It never existed, and I don't think it will ever exist. There is no Orthodox establishment. The rabbis
The Aguda
accept.
and the OU.
What?
The Aguda and the OU.
That's not establishment.
What is it?
Do you really feel bound? I don't know whether you're from one or the other. Do you really feel bound when they tell you, this is what you got to believe and this is what you got to do? Do you really feel bound? Or do you have your personal Rebbe or Madrich? Or you feel you have your own sense and you do what you understand?
Yeah, but when Aguda
So that
started-
means, if you don't, that means there's no Orthodox establishment.
but when
Because
Aguda
among
started-
they like to give the image that there's only one Das Torah. You hear? Rav Hutner Zatzal, my Rebbe, once said a good witticism. We all know the Gemara in Megillah Daf Testament Aleph with Talmai HaMelech. That's where the Septuagint came from, that they translated the Torah into Greek. So he took 70 people, locked each one in a separate room, and told them translate. And it was Min HaShamayim that they all translated it the exact same way. They left out certain passages which would have been difficult to explain to the Greeks, right? So it was like a nes. So Rafutni used to say, Oich mir a nes. If they would have been all in the same room and said the same thing, that would be a nes. There is no such thing as Orthodox establishment. I'm telling you, it doesn't exist. The rabbis, except if you're well read in the protocols of the elders of Zion, then you could believe it. But there's no such thing.
There's a Yid we know who's married to a Goyeta. And my wife wants to invite him for Shabbos. And
You can. You can invite him for Shabbos. Sure.
his wife is a Goyeta is going to come.
Yeah, sure. You're not going to enhance their relationship as a result of the invitation. You're just being friendly with them. Don't preach. Be friendly and talk and everything, you know. They see the Shabbos, so they're inspired because, hey, we don't have something like this. We don't have where the whole family gets together and the kids say something. Hey, this is a real nice thing. And that leaves a very positive influence. That's what it does. That's your job. I think it was one of the sessions, the Chafetz Chaim, I mentioned this, that a person used to say to, a person came to the Chafetz Chaim, I keep telling my son to learn, and I keep telling it to him, and he's not listening. So the Chafetz Chaim says, you're accomplishing something. When he'll have a son, he'll tell him to learn. So you want your son to learn. In other words, by seeing it, that's what the way a person is influenced. Yes, sir.
Good morning.
But it has to be loud.
Loud. Unfortunately, as the Rav said, we don't have a united Jewish front or an established Jewish society. What can be done as there's a big situation with the children going off to Derech we're here to Shabbos for Project Inspire, and we're here to be inspired. How do we get the yeshivas to give over this type of message to the children as they're growing?
They do. They give the message. But this malady called children at risk has nothing to do with the message the yeshiva is giving. I must tell you, this malady is about 30 years old, and people don't realize these kids, and wherever there's a large Jewish community, Flatbush, Muncie, Lakewood of all places, Lakewood has a huge contingent of these children. Bacchanalian orgies, you wouldn't believe it, what goes on. Literally, Bacchanalian orgies. It's not to believe, and that's why I mentioned last night I mentioned that people who are involved originally held that their 30% were sexually molested, and after a year or two, 60%. And I know of people who recently, 2 years ago, who are involved with these kids, they say over 90% was sexually molested. So what has that got to do with the message the yeshiva is giving? We don't know what happens. I remember about 7-8 years ago, I read an article in the Science Times where they said that science held that we know everything there is to know about the brain, and all of a sudden they realized they know nothing about the brain. There's total turnaround. What we know, and it's almost, you could say it's a fact, we don't know what happens here. Let me give you an example. Stuttering, stammering. Jewish mothers are guilty of a lot of the stammering and stuttering because it was part of the tradition, a left-handed person, a linker. It's Sitra de Smola and Kabbalah, So mothers did whatever they could to make them into righties. We found out, it's a long thing already, there's something in the brain where speech is connected to the motor, So by doing that, they did something where the person started to stammer or to stutter. But we didn't know it, way back. So, but it's something, we do know this. We know that children who are molested, to some children, evidently it's water off a duck's back. Nothing happened. But to some children, there's trauma. Sometimes immediate trauma. The big Mavinim, right away when a child acts out one way, the big Mavinim who have experience can tell this kid was molested. This kid was molested, but it doesn't really matter because the way the child is acting. Because there is simonim one way or the other, and many a times it goes undetected. But something happens up here in the brain. I personally am very much involved in this as Rav of Ohel of Nefesh, so I've been involved with this for a very long time. I know of so many cases. First of all, we know there are cases, Rachmana litzlan, of suicide by adolescents, that when they were molested, even if it was total mishkav zacher, certainly this happens, suicide. And when it's not suicide, totally disturbed. I know of a few cases where people of authority, mind you, a Rabbi or a principal, who molests a child of a certain age, the child knows he's being molested. He doesn't say anything because it's the Rabbi or the principal. So the child is holding it in, but he knows it's wrong. Something's wrong over here. A few cases, the children had to go on psychiatric drugs a few years later because there was something there that goes awry. I mean, something happens. So science hasn't been able to pinpoint it yet. Maybe someday they will, but we know something happens. So I believe these people who are in the field when they're telling you that. I believe them. They say they know. They interview and they find out.
Can I just add, maybe for people that I said they're on drugs, they're off the derech, they're doing crazy, whatever it is. So there may be very high percentage of those people that had a molested. But I'm
not saying it's guaranteed.
Right.
I'm just saying molestation leads to who knows what.
There's a plethora of kids that were not molested, who may not be doing drugs, but they're struggling with their Yiddishkeit. They're not inspired. They're not feeling that.
That doesn't mean the youth at risk. That means there could be many other reasons.
How to instill in them the inspiration, the belief, the emunah pshuta,
There may be many different ways, but it's almost like asking me what's a great formula in life, and I say buy low, sell high. If you know what I mean. If I had the answers, I would package it. Many a time, there's not one answer. Many a time, in fact, in a way, we learn from Kisikna Eved Ivri, Mechru Bezdin. So the rationale that Rishonim give, a man stole, right? A man stole, or a man was so desperate that he sold himself as a slave, as an Eved Ivri. So the concept of what you're supposed to do and how to live with him, again, only by Eved Ivri. Misha kona Eved latzmai, kona odin latzmai. One pillow, we heard about it, you got to give it to him. And he sees the way the family lives. This is the real way of what the criminologist would very much like, that instead of locking them up in prison, hand them out to people who are doing clean living, and that way they'll learn, and that will be the hashpah, and that's really the job. The job is to be a living example of a person who's doing the right thing and living, we hope, happily. That's really what it is.
Shouldn't it be a curriculum?
Louder, please.
Shouldn't there be a curriculum in the yeshivas? When kids are in by pre-1A or like still by the mortars, there seems to be a lot of chinuch. And then there's like a college where the whole curriculum is based on more chumash and more logical.
Sorry, I'm not hearing
He's
it.
asking, should there be a curriculum that's a more inspiring curriculum as people go to schools?
A curriculum
I mean, if you feel that a curriculum would help in these things, and you have the ear of people in education, more power to you. I'm not against it. You would have to, of course, test it and show that your curriculum works. It could make a lot of sense, but if it doesn't work, big deal. You know what I mean? If you can do it, more power. I'm all with you. I'm for you. But you have to have some sort of studies made that it works, by all means.
There's a general problem today, I think, in chinuch somehow, because you see that the younger generation, you go to a kiddush on Shabbos, and all the kids sit down at the table, and the adults are standing. So there's something
But
wrong.
up front, there's something definitely wrong, but this is a parental job. Don't sit in the front, let the older people sit here. But you're right. But you also see at a kiddush lately that the adolescents are drinking heavily. So it's not because all of a sudden they became alcoholics, it's because their parents, and this is an old story. I remember reading a commentary, it goes back over 50 years, 60 years that I read it. It was a commentary from the 30s. Why are there no Jewish alcoholics? And they went into all kinds of sociological reasons. But now, and this is after many generations, now we're holding Baruch Hashem that was so well integrated that there were Jewish alcoholics. So what happened? The children see the parents discussing, hey, this is good stuff, you know. So when children see that, just like children in my kufa, we started smoking very young, because we even wanted to fast Yom Kippur way before halacha dictates it, because it's being an adult, right? So we started to smoke. The movies, the hero was always with a cigarette, you know, the way he inhaled was something. So it was part of, I want to emulate him. The poison comes from the parents. So that's really what you have to undo. It's the biggest hashpah.
Anybody got a question who hasn't asked yet? Otherwise, we'll go back to the other people. Anyone wanted to ask a question? Yeah, go ahead.
How do you explain to a non-firm person when you see in the media, let's say, protests by the Torah Karta, let's say you see protests in Eretz Yisrael against the draft, how do you explain that? Because they identify them. How do you explain that?
I don't understand. How do I explain?
Somebody who's not from
Yeah.
comes over to me
Yeah.
and says, I see the Torah Karta demonstrating.
Right.
Or I see in Eretz Yisrael, I see
The Natura Carta, or what they call the Schwarzes of Natura Carta,
Whatever.
that go to Iran, right?
Correct.
So to them, I say they're crazy. Haven't you ever met crazy people? The guy that shut up that school. Isn't he crazy? So isn't that an answer? They're crazy. What they call the Schwarzes of Natura Carta are not normal people. And we have, Rahman al quite a few of them. They're not normal. If you want to know Natura Carta, it'll take some time for me to explain it to you, but I'm ready to explain it. I'm very tolerant. Just as there are people in medicine, you have different opinions. I know of cases where we went to one doctor, there was a special wound that the person had. One doctor says, keep it wet at all times. And he went to, and he was suffering, went to another doctor. Keep it dry at all times. What do you do then, huh? So even in medicine, you have different opinions. And each doctor holds the other guy's crazy, he doesn't know medicine, right? So why are we not entitled to have different shittas in Yiddishkeit? Your Rebbe says this, my Rebbe says this. There's always a third Rebbe that's tolerant of both. So, but a lot of times you don't choose Rebbes. The Rebbe, you get into the right class at the time when you're influenced. But that's what it's all about. It's a shita by Yiddishkeit. I mean, I have deep admiration for Rav Kook Zatzal. It was not popular in my day, but my Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal was very close to Rav Kook when he was young. Then it became politically, what is the word? Incorrect. So in the sukkah, there was always a huge portrait of Rav Kook. One year it was missing. It was never put back on the wall again because it was politically incorrect. But I'm also a very great admirer of the late Satmar Rebbe Zatzal, who was at Tzaddik Yesod Olam. This was his shita. Please, we had Gedolim. You have to understand, each one was entitled to his shita. And there's a Mesorah. Let me give you an example. Rav Shamshon Fol Hirsch Zeichet Tzaddik Levrocha. Do you know that Rav Abramotcha, the Gerer Rebbe, the first Gerer Rebbe, said he's a walking Mussar Sefer? And there's an apocryphal story, which you're not mechuyev to believe it, that he once came among Chassidim, and they gave him something to eat, and as soon as he ate a bite, they grabbed the plate and ate shirayim. So he had a big question mark over his head, and he turned to him, he says, they're being mechabed you. So he stood up and said, Danke schön, meine Herren, Danke schön. So that's the story. It's a good story anyway, right? But they held he's a tzaddik. And Rab Shul Leib Diskin said he's a Russia. You know why? Because Rab Shamshon Fol Hirsch held that shaking a woman's hand, you can even offer your hand. Because it's not derech chiba, das ist Höflichkeit. It's derech eretz. Has nothing to do with derech chiba. So when he offers his hand to Mrs. Diskin, Rabbi Shul Leib Diskin says he's a Russia. Okay? Eat that. Eat that story. Answer the story. So what was he? Was he a tzaddik or a Russia? It's a chalukah deis. How many times do you have in the Gemara where one said to the other, Rachmana litzla midaita dedach. Amalei, Rachmana litzla midaita dedach. There's such a thing as machlekes. And seifei lehiskayim, you won't solve it. Because these are machlekes l'shem shamayim. Okay?
One area where non-frum Jews have a lot of problems is with Eved Kanani. The idea that there is ownership, not the same with Eved Ivri. How do we explain
see,
that?
you want to go back to the civil war, where Jews had to answer, religious Jews had to answer. Not only religious, the Bible speaks about slavery. I don't know if but the Bible, and the very religious people, the Bible speaks about slavery. What's wrong with slavery? And if you wish, many people who are employed are no less slaves than the indentured servants of yesteryear. Believe me. There's slavery. You got to make a living. If you got to make a living and you're limited, you better listen to the boss. And many a times he's a very unreasonable person. Isn't that slavery?
So how do we explain that to...
How do we explain it? What's wrong with it? Why do you take it as a given? I have servants working for me. So we don't call them slaves. All the people working here in the hotel, why don't you call them slaves from now on? Oh, it's not a nice word, but among us, we'll call them slaves. What's the difference? Tell me the difference. A harsh boss can say, what are you doing here? Get to work. Or what are you doing here? You should have done that. And he opens his mouth and they take it because they'll lose their job.
But they can quit.
Sure they can. So what? Who tells you? You've been brainwashed that the most delightful thing in the world is democracy. Well, look what's happening now in the last few years with democracy, when we all see that it's all shochad. And even with the judiciary, everybody is being bought. So that golden thing, democracy, is kind of being tarnished, isn't it? But we've been brainwashed, democracy. Because the Greeks believed in democracy. Who tells you that that's the greatest ideal? Our greatest ideal is theocratic monarchy, isn't it? Okay? But even among kings, you have kings that were Rishayim Gemurim, as we see in Tanakh. Good, the human being could glitch. But because we have been brainwashed, democracy, he could quit. Yeah, he could quit. There are so many people that can't quit. Look at all what's making the news of all the women, whatever the story was, that were used, that were oppressed. Well, what do you mean they could quit? Why did they stay on in the job? What are you answering there? Because they were slaves to their job. So theoretically they could quit, but they didn't quit. They suffered. You answer that, because they're slaves. So just because he's called a slave, we've been brainwashed. So what's wrong with slavery? Tell me what's wrong with slavery. It's a label. But that's exactly what's going on today. Why didn't all these women quit? They're complaining. Because I need the job. I got to make a living. Yeah, but you can get a job elsewhere. Who says I can? What am I going to do until then, right? And third of all, who says it's going to be any better? Because aren't all men slobs? How do I know they're slobs? Because look at my employer. Why should she think that there are some nice men out there who hire the women to do whatever is necessary? So that's what it's all about. So it became the label is objectionable. Faket, Eved Knani. So first of all, there are certain limitations what a boss can do. We're not going down to the south where there were achzarim among goyim, where the Simon Legree's, whatever, Uncle Tom's Cabin, whatever the book showed. There were Yidden, when they had an Evet Kanani who's mechuyev in mitzvahs keisha, they treated him nicely. And you're mechuyev to treat your Evet Kanani nicely. So what's your problem? Because he has a label. Big deal. What's wrong with labels? I can indoctrinate a person that it's a wonderful label. After all, aren't we all supposed to be Avdei Hashem? Slave? Yeah. To Hashem. Yes.
How would the Rabbi explain how are we different than Palestinian terrorists? We have a mitzvah of what?
How would I explain?
How are we different than Palestinian terrorists?
I should explain a Palestinian terrorist.
No, we have a chiyuv of Mechias Amalek, of Noshim, Anoshim, V'taf.
Mechias Amalek, it's how do you explain that we have to obliterate a whole nation? The Amalek,
women and children.
How do we understand Mechias Amalek?
Versus, let's say, you're doing a Kiruv session, somebody's asking you, you're not...
I can give you a theological answer, but you're not going to be happy with it. The theological answer is, how do you explain a doctor that's taking off a foot from a human being just because it's, it's gangrene? He's taking off a foot from a human being, this achzori, this roitzeach. No, but it's going to kill the person. So theologically, Amalek is the koach hara, right? And anoshim, noshim, v'taf, without exception, is ra. And if we're not going to obliterate them, the Rabbi Shalom, who should know all, right, says they're going to come to kill your children if you don't obliterate them, because this is ra. Don't you know the famous joke? The Taimani was walking, he just came to Eretz Yisrael, but he's coming from a few thousand years earlier, right? And he's walking on train tracks, and he hears doo doo, doesn't know what it means, and the train hits him and breaks every bone in his body, takes him a year to recuperate, and he's home, and his wife asks him, can I give you a cup of tea? Sure. So she puts on one of those newfangled things, and all of a sudden he hears a whistle. He runs over and takes off his shoe and starts beating it. So his wife says, what are you doing? Tzrichen laharog mazikim elu keshehem ketanim. The Torah says, Kishahem Ketanim, they're going to grow up to be Rotzchem. That's what Amalek is. And since the Rabbi Shalom knows all, and that's what he's telling us, so you're cutting away the foot that's full of gangrene to save the rest of civilization. That's the rationale. If you're a believing Jew, you accept it because God said so, and that the rationale is built into it.
Obviously, the Palestinians, they themselves believe that they have that rationale to kill as well.
You know, do you really feel Hitler didn't really hate the Jews and feel that they're the scourge of all evil to mankind? Do you think it was just politics? He hated the Jews with a passion. He had Jewish blood in him. All the historians know this. That I believe his father's father was Jewish, who was intimate with the maid. He was a Jewish rich boy, a spoiled Jewish rich boy who was intimate with the maid. This is historians, I'm not telling you Baba Meister. Do you know the Turquemada, who was really ran in with a cross to Ferdinand and Isabel and said that Yashka was sold for 30 silver pieces and you're selling, you know? He was Jewish. His mother's mother was Jewish. Lenin came from Jewish stock. Yeshaya says there were Jews there. There's Jewish blood there. But are you, just because Hitler really believed it, therefore, how do we finish that sentence? They really believe that they're going to get Olam Haba by killing Jews, even if it's only going to be one-on-one, which is really non-profit. Right? It's non-profit, but they're ready to do it because they're ready for Olam Haba. So what do we derive from this? That's part of, it's part of being a nirdaf. But so where do we go from there? What we shouldn't say is that all Seinei Yisrael are Amalekim. That's not so. We have no right to say it because an Amalek is an Amalek.
If I can ask a follow-up about the slavery question. The Rabbi asked, what's so bad about it? Is the etzem violence of one boss of Adam over another one makes a mensch into Talmud?
No, by Evet Ivri. I didn't say that by Evet Karani. I said by Evet Ivri, the Evet Ivri who glitched, whether he stole or according to Tzemach Leixen, or the person who sold himself.
The original question was Takabeg and Evet Knan.
How? Oh, Evet Kanani. We spoke about Evet Ivri before. Evet Kanani, I'm simply saying if we weren't brainwashed that there's something intrinsically evil in having a slave, I don't see why something's objectionable. I say we have slavery today without the label, but that's exactly what we have. Many, many employees are slaves. They're worse than indentured servants. I'm telling you.
Maybe I'll ask just to...
It's just that with the word slavery, wow, that's a terrible word. It became a terrible word because we grew up that way. There's nothing wrong with it at all.
Could I ask?
Please.
A person who's either Tinik Shanishba, or he's not a Maimon. He might be Tinik Shanishba as well. So what is the Rav Paskin in terms of him getting an aliyah or being part of...
An aliyah? I believe that you can only give anyone an aliyah or a kibbutz by Sheva brachas. He's an uncle, if he believes in God. If he doesn't believe in God, you're machshel him with a bracha, with a bracha levatala. What do you mean bracha Hashem? But if he believes in God, you can give him a bracha.
He believes in that there's a creator, not necessarily in...
A creator.
And so that's the same for Zeman. Zeman would be, so somebody's a Maimon.
Technically you can, if he's a Maimon,
Even though he's a Tinik Shanishba. And he can get aliyah and be counted in the minyan.
Counting in a minyan is not pashut, but pashtus, yes, a Tinik Shanishba. Rab Moshe Feinstein Zatzal held that even a real mummer, because he says, how do we know that you need 10 for a minyan? Ad Mosayla Eido Hara Zais, Yatsu Kolev and Yeshua. He says they were all a bunch of apokulsim and everything else, and we learn out minyan from them. Rab Moshe holds that you can be mitzaref, even a mummer, an apokoris, to a minyan. Yeah, that's his raya. You know the famous witticism that someone, but it's a big machlekes in Pesach. The Mechasaluzah has a tshuva. There are many tshuvas. So one said to the other, yes, the Gemara says, Kol tainus she'ein bo mipashi Yisrael einoi tainus. Sharei chelben orei chayra. And yet, you know, it enhances all the other besamim. So he says, so you see, you can use chelbena. So he says, yeah, but there are achadas so besamim. You're not mitzarefim to the minion. Okay. Yes.
The Rosh said that the count for a minion is one thing. What about an aliyah on Shabbos if you know that they drove on Shabbos?
What's one thing got to do with the other? What's the difference? If the halach is you can give him an aliyah, because that Shabbos he was machalo.
I've heard from poskim that it's because it's not a cover of the Torah because on Shabbos because they're machal Shabbos.
If you've been out of town, it happens all the time.
That's a regish. That's not a psak halacha. That's a regish. I'm not disagreeing with the regish. It's a wonderful regish. But you know, a lot of times when you're forced to do a kibbud, give them psichas ha'aron. That's a good idea. I was once, it's about close to 50 years, I say a shir for Rabbanim from Long Island. So I'm semi-retired, so now they come to my house. 5 years ago, I went to a place in Long Island where they met. And of course, I had to deal with a lot of problems that rabbis have. One of the great problems they have is when it's usually the president's daughter that married without a get and had a mamzerel. And then you have to go and, make a mishaberach. So I have written a mishaberach in Hebrew and in English without saying nice things about the mamzer. But rather, and the presidents were very happy with my nuschais. They didn't understand it. So that's what a Rav has to be able to cope with. Write things that they don't understand. Yes, sir.
Is there any strong new movement?
I'm not hearing you, I'm sorry.
Is there any strong movement, let's say, of Breslev Hasidus? Interesting, or called this type of Breslev Hasidus. But often...
You want me to explain Breslev Hasidus?
Called, let's say, labeled Hasidus or New Hasidus, Breslev Hasidus. So often, let's say, people that are becoming Bali Tshuva, they find these types of things very interesting. The question is...
It is very interesting. It is, what do you mean they find?
The question is, there ever a time that it's what they're doing, it's dangerous, or not Yiddish, it's
Tell me what they're doing that's dangerous. Please tell me. The only thing that they do is dangerous is that they're Yom and V'layla by the Kvarim. So yeah, but tell me what's wrong or what you find objectionable. I'm not a Braslava Chassid, but I can defend all the Chassidus. You see, it's attracting very rational people. There's something there that, just as there are foods that you abhor, that other people find delicious. Would you tell me, hey, I don't get it, right? But you have different tastes, right? It's the same thing with all kinds of thought, with drachim and avodas Hashem. It's a derech and avodas Hashem, and because it's based on Yiddishkeit, there's some very delicious things there that attract different people.
The Rabbi was saying that.
What's wrong?
Like the is that the same?
Please. I'm against narishkeit. But what's it got to do? But they'll explain it away. Look, there are a lot of enigmatic...
A letter fell from Shemayim or whatever it is that
there are, in almost every field of thought, there are difficulties. Let me give you an example. A person has a problem, he comes to a doctor. We're talking not a fly-by-night. He's coming to a medical doctor. He has 15 smichas on the wall, right? What should I do, doctor? So the doctor writes him out a prescription. Do you ask the doctor, why is it going to work? I'm not a doctor. What do I know? So what am I doing by taking his pill? It's a pill. Who knows what's in this pill? But I am relying on the fact that people said, this man knows medicine. He must know what he's doing. Does every patient, the doctor would chop off the head of most of his patients if they would ask him, now what's going to be, doctor? Explain the pill to me. He has to give a lecture every time he gives a prescription. I'm a doctor. In my opinion, this pill probably will help you. No guarantees. So I'm giving you a prescription. So do you question it? Most of the time, in every different field of Avodas Hashem, you have things that are delicious and delightful because it's Torah. It should be. Torah is very geschmack. There are sometimes difficulties, which many people will understand the answer, many people won't. Yeah, but he's a doctor. He must know what he's talking about. That's the answer. So, of course, there are a lot of difficulties with every chassidus. With chassidus in general. You have people who are still laughing at chassidim. I'm a Rebbe Sheinikel, but I'm very tolerant of those people. Because many a times, every Erev Shabbos, different chassidim give you out the different Torahs and stories and what have you. And I laugh myself at a lot of the publications. Because there's what to laugh at. So I'm very tolerant of people who laugh. I'm telling you, I'm very tolerant of them. Because there's something to laugh about. So what? But I got to tell you that in my youth, and even today, I read something which is at least a Suffolk Baba Maisa, but I feel I get Yerushalayim from it. What should I tell you? So there's something there, right? Okay, there's something there in every derech of Avodas Hashem.
Yes. If a person is described as being a Baal Tshuva, or describes themselves that way, and was not raised in Yiddishkeit, are they speaking Lashon Hara about their parents?
Why is it Lashon Hara if the parents were Tinoikshim Shenishbu? It's not Lashon Hara at all. Of course, I do have a Chiddush La'alacha. I really would paskin this way, because I have a raya from a Gemara. It's a Chiddush. Invariably, parents that know nothing, and this usually happens, that the person has a sibling that is marrying out of the faith, right? The Nesoyan of Balei Tshuva. And the parents say, honor thy father, and that they know. They know that pasuk. What do you mean? I'm telling you to go to the wedding. No? So what the paskin is one thing. But I must tell you that I hold. There's a din that if a parent is a Rasha, there's no din of kibbud aveim. That's a black and white. Ba'oisei ma'isa amcha. Nasi ba'amcha loisoyer. And the concept of kavod nasi is because he is the father of the generation, so to speak, of theologically. And the Torah says only ba'osei ma'isa amcha. So therefore, if he's a Rasha, I'm not mechuyev to give kavod to a nasi who's a Rasha. Therefore, we learn out from that, I'm not mechuyev to give kavod to a parent that's a Rasha. Fine. But we just spoke, Tinnik Shenishba is not a Rasha. So I hold lahalacha that it doesn't say Rasha. Oisa Maisa Amcha, it says. A parent that's not Oisa Maisa Amcha, even if they're Tinoikshim Shenishbu, there's no chiyuv of kibbud aveim. I have a raya from a Gemara, Makas Daf Chesed at Beis. I don't want to go into it, but I have a raya, and that's the way I would paskin. There is no chiyuv of kibbud aveim if there ain't no isamai samcha, even if they're not rishayim, but it's a different chalos shem. It's ain't no isamai samcha.
But you can give him an aliyah, though.
Sure, because he's not a Rasha. It's not a Rasha. What's it? Not only that, the Rambam brings with people who are varyonim, you do it for Kiruv. So b'dafki you want to give them an aliyah.
Amcha means that they're not giving mitzvahs? What's it? Maisa Amcha means what?
It means he does what a Jew is supposed to do.
Right.
A Jew is a Shem Shabbos. He's Nebuch, not a Shem Shabbos. The only time we say Nebuch is from the Rambam. That's the way Reb Chaim, but it's not Pashut. Reb Chaim is not Pashut.
How does the Rabbi understand that?
I wrote a sefer on it. I mean, it's an Arichas Dvarim. But that Reb Chaim said, the Rambam gives us the Yud Gimel Ikrim of Amunah. So Reb Chaim used this, and the Rambam writes about people who make mistakes because the way they interpret Tanakh, they think, but that's wrong. And therefore, it would seem no Olam Haba, because you don't believe. If you don't have the quarter to get into the theater, you can see how outdated I am from the fact that I said a quarter, right? But if you don't have the admission, you can't get in. So what do you mean? If you don't believe, you can't get into it. That's the way the Rambam seems to say. So Reb Chaim used to say, he's making a mistake. The pasuk sounds that way. So he's Nebuchadnezzar Apokayres. Nebuchadnezzar Apokayres is Eichen Apokayres. But it's not Pashut. I must tell you, that's not a Pashut thing. But that's a day in what the Rambam seems to say, that Tinuk Shenishba, but if you don't believe, you don't believe. You don't have the price of admission. You got to have the price.
Well, it's a follow-up to what you said.
Loud, please.
Yeah, for kibbud, if they're a tinok shenishba and you're not obligated in kibbud of or kibbud aim, does that include things like not giving them food, not sitting in their chair, all of the other?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
But it's terrible behavior because you're giving them a message that being a frum Yid is to be not a nice person, which may be Chilul Hashem. That's how bad it is.
Very good.
It's been a pleasure, Rabbi Say.
I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the Rav for coming for the Shabbos and Rebbetzin, an incredible schus that we had. It took a little bit of work. We want to thank the Rebbetzin that somehow we were able to work together with the Rav, then he came, and we hope the Rav enjoyed it.
You know, the power behind the power. Yeah.
Thank you very much.